Hello everyone, my name is Denise and today I have my friend and also a counselor, Chen Yi Qin here with me. He is the founder of Holistic Counselling and he practices at the same place as me, which is a space between at Tanjong Pagar. So Yi Qin, would you like to give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Okay, thank you, Denise, for having me. Okay, so I'm a counselor and psychotherapist. So basically, I did my training in Sydney, Australia, and my training is very focused on person-centered therapy. So, um, and my training is also very grounded in this very recent field known as interpersonal neurobiology. And it's the field that we're gonna talk about and discuss a bit today lah. Yeah.
Okay, so Isi and I, we both like this author called Ian McGilchrist. Yeah, he's a psychiatrist as well as I think neurobiologist or neurologist, which means that he actually dissects many brains. So this is, I think, his first book, The Master and His Emissary, talking about the left brain versus right brain. That means the hemispheric differences. So IPNB, Interpersonal Neurobiology, from my understanding of it, is about using this theory and understanding of the left and right hemisphere and incorporating it into counseling. And it's found by, I think, this guy called Dan Siegel, right? So,
Yes.
okay, this is not my area of expertise, but this is the area expertise of Yi Qin. He loves this IPNB, so I'm just going to hand the time over to him so you can talk a bit more about IPNB.
Okay, so thank you, Denise, for this invitation. Okay. Um, so one of the key areas that IPNB is informed by is by the split brain functioning. Okay. So very early on, I think in the 60s, there were some neurologists who found that there were certain split brain patients where they kind of like the patients were having all sorts of symptoms, so they split the patient's brain into half. And what they found is that the left and the right brains each have their own functions. Okay, so generally, we can say that the right brain is more involved in things like emotions, verbal skills, in speech and language. Okay, whereas the left brain is more involved in things like logic, reasoning, math, and it's more analytical. Okay, so in the more recent field of interpersonal neurobiology, what Dan Siegel found was that in the most, I'll say the most the best, the people who have reported the best well-being, okay, emotionally, in terms of psychological well-being and all of those, they are actually very integrated in the way that both their left and right brains function.
Okay, so I remember that's like in our own conversations, you mentioned about like if you are too left brain centered, you can be very rigid. If you are too right brain, you can be quite chaotic. And what we really want is to be in the middle. That is where there's this thing called fluidity. Would you like to share with us more about what fluidity means?
Okay, so if you think about it in terms of like if you think about it in terms of extremes, right? Someone who only lives in the right brain, that is in terms of like the feelings and everything, they don't use the left brain functions, so it's very hard for them to access the logical part of their brain. So in that sense, they kind of live in quite a chaotic state of mind. Okay, so everything quite um is quite chaotic in the sense that they can't manage their own anxieties. So everything is running wild in the right brain. Okay, so that's how Danziger terms the phrase chaos. Whereas in some clients, Danziger can see that um, you know, they present as quite rigid. So they kind of have a very strict routine or a very fixed way of responding to certain stimuli. Okay. So in those clients, what Danziger would term those clients to be as kind of like more rigid in a sense. Okay, so everything is has to be go in very sequential order, and everything has to be very logical and linear. Yeah.
So what about fluidity, right in the middle, when you are not too chaotic and not too rigid? How would that look like?
Okay. So fluidity in the sense that that Danziger says is refers to clients who are both able to access the left and the right brains. Okay. So sometimes there are times when we happen upon situations where we where things makes us anxious, okay, or something really terrible happens to us, and you know all the all the feelings come out, okay. So someone who is more integrated in our in their brain functions would present as someone who is able to use their left brain to literally calm the right hemisphere of the brain. Okay. So in that sense, someone is more fluid and able to adapt to whatever circumstances come. Okay. So and conversely, using the other side of the brain, left brain, okay, someone who is fluid is also able to adapt to different changes, and like um like for example, one example I can use is that someone who's not fluid has to go to certain has to be in certain environments for them to flourish, whereas someone who is fluid is able to flourish in whatever environment that they are in.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking, recently I stumbled upon a podcast talking about Taoism and talking about the concept of Wu Wei. I think Wu Wei or Wu Wei. It's about like and they give quite good examples in the Tao Te Ching. It's like they said the swimmer who keeps swimming in the sea but never gets tired because he's just moving according to the currents. Or maybe a butcher who keeps cutting meat but he cuts along the grain, so his knife never loses its sharpness. So when you tell me about things like a fluidity, that sort of comes to mind. It's about, would it be correct to like engage both left and the right brain as needed so that you can reach your full potential? Am I right or wrong? Please correct me.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Okay. So one of the things that one of the examples I can use, okay, is like certain societies, they exhibit certain traits. Okay, like for example, Singapore is a very left brain society because we value like stability, we value constancy, we value safety. Okay, so everything is very structured, very linear, and very logical. But uh, so the people, I'll say that in general, people living in Singapore tend to use their left brains a lot more. Okay, so um, in so to answer your question,
So as I was saying, I'm just wondering also, as I'm reading the book Ian McGilchrist, I'm like slowly moving through his this one book. So I'm now at the point where I think he's quoting Heidegger as well as people like Kierkegaard. Sorry about the pronunciation. He's quoting them about say if you try to label it, if you try to put a label on it, then it loses its characteristic. So the left brain has this tendency to want to categorize and label things, whereas the right brain tends to see it for what it is in reality. So I quite like that because I find that, especially how we practice in our counseling practice, not as a psychologist, but as a counselor, because psychologists do all the diagnosing and all that, right? So part of their energy and their brain power is always they're looking for signs to pigeonhole the person into a kind of a diagnosis. Whereas counselors, we tend to want to sidestep that and to just focus on the treatment. In a way, because of the history of how the psychologists and the counselors came out of, that actually created more of a right brain way of looking at clients. And in a way, I'm sort of proud of being a counselor for that. Okay, this is just some of my ramblings. Any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. And one of the terms that Dan Siegel coined is to name it, to tame it. Okay. So what he means is that the moment, like in neurological studies, right, when you put a person into an fMRI machine, what they found is that when the moment you are able to label and name the feelings that you're feeling, okay, like I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling sad, okay, what happens is that the part of your brain that is really firing and activated, yeah, the could be the amygdala when you're feeling anxious, that that part literally reduces its activity or the neuron firings the moment you're able to name your feelings and name it accurately. Yeah.
Okay. No, this name it to tame it thing, I really like it because I think a lot of clients, especially like you mentioned, clients in Singapore tend to be more left brain. They just generally come in to say, I feel bad, but they lack the language to describe their feelings. And as a result, they tend to be unable to name it, to tame it. But when you give them the feelings wheel and all the new language to describe their feelings, then they, oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed today. I'm feeling very disappointed. I feel disgusted. I feel a lot of maybe a contempt towards myself, stuff like that. Then as long as they start to be able to name their feelings, I feel that they start to calm down already, because then it is not just a very iffy sense of a badness. Now there is possibly a cause, a way to contextualize the problem so that it's no longer a very global problem, but it is context driven. Okay, any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I think a lot of clients miss out on, especially early in childhood, is validating environment. Okay, because the thing about our feelings and emotions is that they are a warning sign towards something. Okay, so for example, anxiety is a warning for us to prepare for the future. Okay, and something like maybe grief is a warning for us. Is an indication for us that someone important to us has have passed. Okay, so the moment that we address these feelings and emotions, we are actually taking power away from them rather than, a lot of parents think that, a lot of parents actually think that, or they feel that they can't sit with the feelings or help the children, when you name the feelings become even more overwhelming. Actually, the truth is that the opposite happens.
I also think that maybe in the Singapore culture, it's quite common for people to like to sweep their uncomfortable feelings under the rug and hope that they disappear. What are your thoughts or feelings about that?
Mm. Yeah, that's very true as well. That's what I notice a lot about the culture over here because honestly, I find that our education system isn't very good at helping us with this kind of life skill to understand things like emotional intelligence, um, things like being able to it's not just the education part, but also the capacity part to be able to build the resilience towards certain feelings and um, learning how to manage our feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are skills.
I was just wondering for okay, what is one word of advice you give to a parent who tends to wanna like sweep the nasty feelings under the carpet, not only for their children but for themselves? This is a habit that is running through the whole family system. What is one word of advice you'd like to give such a parent?
Okay. So I guess the advice will be come for therapy. Okay. Um, Actually, there is a lot to explore about why a parent or someone would want to sweep the feelings under the rug. Okay. So is it something that their parents taught them to do? Is it something that they feel is once it's open up, it becomes like a can of worms? Or is it something like a Pandora's box where you open up and then it gets worse and worse? Okay. And whether or not they feel that there's someone in their life who has the capacity to help them deal with those feelings. Because a lot of times, even when you try to sweep those feelings under the rug, they will come back and bite you in certain ways. Yeah.
Mm. I quite like what you mentioned there. I think sometimes it's not only what you mentioned, it's very important to have a person, a very steady figure around you to help to regulate you as you're growing up. And then also to learn how to self-regulate. But some people, they just don't feel they can handle it. And over the years, after stuffing so many worms into their can, they're worried that once they open up the worm, it's just going to be like a worm volcano kind of eruption thing, and it just everything will be everywhere. So they start to get scared. So I suppose you're right. If it's really become to that state, getting professional help from a therapist might really be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and then okay, I know I'm going to go on a tangent now to ask you a bit about your recent experience at the Vipassana Meditation Center. Tell us more about what is Vipassana meditation.
Okay, so this is a very interesting topic that I'm very happy to share about. Okay, so basically, one of the key modalities that I practice in is mindfulness. Okay, but I haven't really had the pure experience of what it's like to be mindful until a few months ago when I had the opportunity to enroll in a Vipassana course. It's a 10-day course, and in the 10 days, we weren't allowed to have any electronic devices. We weren't allowed to have to go outside the course site. And every day you do nothing but just meditate. Okay. So let's start with the etymology first. Okay. So Vipassana is an ancient Indian language Pali word for it means what it means is true sight, okay, or seeing things as they are. Okay. So the key the key part in Vipassana that the the teacher in my course, okay, he's quite recently deceased. His name is Goenka. Okay. The key part of Vipassana is according to him is learning two main skills, okay, through meditation. The first part is awareness, okay, and the other part is being able to um, remain equanimous, okay. So during the 10-day course, what we did was purely we started very small. We started by observing the breath going into our nose, okay, and we slowly migrated our attention throughout the rest of our bodies. Okay, it's a very progressive course, and through the whole course, what we were instructed to remain calm, equanimous. Okay, so that's something that is very helpful to help in the sense that it helps us cultivate a sense of calm, especially in an environment where you're sitting there for hours and hours on end, and then you experience something like itchiness or um could be something like leg pain or something. Yeah, because it happens quite a lot. So what they try to do is they train you to remain calm in different kinds of scenarios. Okay. And the other part of Vipassana is they also train you to be aware of what's happening within your body. Okay. So this ties in very well with IPNB as well, because in IPNB we use we are Dan Siegel found that um, a huge part of our resources that we don't tap on is actually our body. Okay, because a lot of times, especially in Singapore context, we are taught to use our brains, we are taught to think and think and think, but a lot of times we are not taught to use our bodies to feel what we're actually feeling. Okay, so um yeah, that connection, um that the part of using our body to help us build the links between our brain and our mind and the body is actually a very key part of the Vipassana meditation.
I was just wondering, like when after you came back from that 10-day course on Vipassana, how has that influenced your current practice in terms of your therapy and your counseling?
Okay, so I think that after the Vipassana course, I have learned to be more grounded. Okay, um, something that has changed for me is um, that I have a lot more in depth. I, my knowledge of mindfulness I feel is a lot more in depth and a lot more nuanced in the sense that I understand what um like there is other than the teacher Goenka who we listen to his recorded instructions. There's also a teacher over there to help guide us in case we can't remain mindful during the course. So that having that teacher around was also quite helpful in helping me understand like how to be mindful in spite of certain circumstances where you start thinking or missing certain people in your life. Yeah.
Mm, awesome. I'd really like to talk to you more about this. Um, so I think we learned quite a lot today about IPNB and also about Vipassana meditation, and I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to tell anyone to bring today's session to a close?
Mm. I guess that if there's something that I like to say is that um you know I I've received quite a number of calls where a client calls in and is kind of hesitant to engage my services or engage the services of a mental health practitioner. So I'll say that it really takes an open mind, and it takes a lot of courage to step into the therapy room. So I understand the hesitance around that. But also with that said, right, I really would encourage everybody to, because therapy is really for everybody. It helps people, and there really is no harm trying for going for therapy, because at the end of the day, it's you who benefits the most. Yeah.
That's right. I quite like what you said, like therapy is for everyone. Yes and no. I suppose too much therapy can be bad as well, but for a lot of us, we can benefit if, especially if it's a good fit. between you and the therapist, the chemistry is right, and he can so-called spot the blind spots. Like for me, I also undergo every 2 weeks, I see my own psychologist for therapy, been ongoing for a couple of years already. So it's been very helpful for me. So no shame in getting speaking to a well-trained professional. Actually, it can be quite helpful. So okay, everyone, Yi Qin is looking for clients as well. As well as me as well. I will leave his contacts at the description below. As you know, he's into IPNB, but he's also very person-centered, which means that a lot of his therapy will also involve being very patient, holding the space, and just listening to what's going on. So it's going to be a very gentle, non-coercive kind of approach. So there's really no harm giving him a shot. His contacts will be in the description below, and his therapy center is called Holistic Counselling. He's located at the same place as me. So when you pop by to see him, you might also bump into me. So thank you, everyone. And if you enjoyed this video, kindly press like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.